Stop resisting right now.
Get off me! I haven't done anything wrong!
He stood in full navy dress blues beneath the unforgiving Alabama sun. Polished black shoes planted on cracked concrete. Medals weighing heavy on his chest. Both hands raised slowly into the air, to the officer gripping the trigger of a drawn firearm. He wasn't a decorated serviceman or a national asset. He was just another black man who looked out of place. Another perceived threat that needed to be controlled. But to the United States Pentagon, the man standing there was something entirely different, a Tier 1 Navy SEAL commander. A weapon shaped by decades of war, discipline, and sacrifice. On that lonely gas station lot in rural Alabama, none of that mattered. What should have been a routine stop would spiral into an unlawful arrest that ignited a federal firestorm, shattered a corrupt police department, and ended with a judge handing down a staggering 58-year prison sentence. In those first few seconds, the officer believed he was asserting authority. He thought he was stopping a suspect, enforcing order, reminding the world who held power in that moment. What he didn't know was that he was about to wake a sleeping giant, one that didn't fight back with fists or weapons, but with law, evidence, and the full weight of the United States government. This is not just a story about a bad stop or a moment of misplaced aggression. It is a story about arrogance colliding with consequences, about what happens when unchecked power meets unyielding truth. It is the story of how one officer's prejudice and pride triggered a chain reaction that would expose years of corruption, destroy careers, and permanently change a small southern town. And it all began with a man in uniform, standing silently with his hands in the air, while the world watched, unaware that history was about to turn. The relentless heat of a southern July pressed down like a weight as Commander Isaiah Sterling guided his black Ford F-150 off the highway and into Miller's Crossing, a lone gas station surrounded by pine trees and long stretches of empty road. He had been driving for hours, the radio off, his thoughts heavy and distant. Just hours earlier, he had stood graveside in Atlanta, watching the coffin of a fallen brother-in-arms lowered into the earth, a man who had once dragged Isaiah to safety under fire, a man whose name would never appear in any headline. Isaiah wasn't in Alabama for duty. He wasn't on a mission. He was simply trying to get home to his wife, Sarah, and their 2 daughters, who still believed their father fixed computers for the Navy and traveled for boring meetings. Today, for the first time in years, Isaiah wasn't wearing camouflage or body armor. He wore his service dress blues, the high collar stiff against his neck, gold buttons catching the sunlight, ribbons and medals aligned with ceremonial precision. Each one told a story of places most people would never see and horrors few would survive. At 6'4", built like a wall of disciplined muscle, Isaiah moved with the quiet awareness of someone who had spent half his life scanning rooftops and alleyways. Even here, in the stillness of rural Alabama, his instincts never shut off. As he stepped out of the truck and walked toward the pump, the gravel crunching beneath polished shoes, he felt it before he saw it. That familiar sensation. The unmistakable feeling of being watched. Inside the gas station, behind a pane of smudged glass, the elderly clerk watched him with open curiosity. In her 30 years working the register at Miller's Crossing, she had seen drifters, truckers, and locals she'd known since they were children. But she had never seen anyone like this. The man outside looked like he'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. Rigid poster. Immaculate uniform. A presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Across the road, however, The gaze on Isaiah was far less admiring. Parked beneath the fading shadow of a sun-bleached billboard. A Creekwood police cruiser idled with its engine running. Behind the wheel sat Officer Brett Harrison, a 4-year veteran in a department better known for boredom than danger. The heat had made him irritable. The slow shift had left him restless. And he was looking for something. Anything. To remind himself that he still had power. Harrison leaned forward, squinting through his sunglasses. The truck was too clean. The uniform too sharp. The man too confident. To Harrison, that didn't signal discipline or service. It signaled disrespect. "Look at this guy," he muttered, tapping the steering wheel. Middle of nowhere. Flashy truck. Navy uniform. Doesn't add up. In the passenger seat, his rookie partner, Kyle Dunning. Shifted uncomfortably. "He's just getting gas." "Brett," he said quietly. "Probably headed home." Harrison snorted. "Nah. That uniform's fake. Too many medals. One of those stolen valor clowns trying to impress people or score a discount." He opened the door, the cruiser rocking slightly as he stepped out. "I'm checking him out." As the patrol car rolled forward and the red and blue lights flickered to life, Isaiah Sterling felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The moment he had hoped to avoid had just found him. The patrol car cut across the lot and stopped hard, its front bumper blocking Isaiah's truck in a way that left no doubt this was no casual encounter. The red and blue lights flashed silently against the chrome of the fuel pump, washing the scene in pulses of color. Isaiah turned slowly, already measuring distance and movement out of instinct. As Officer Harrison stepped out of the cruiser, his hand rested conspicuously on his holster, his posture stiff with manufactured authority. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't ask a question. "Step away from the vehicle." Harrison barked, his voice sharp and performative, as if an audience were watching. Isaiah paused, the fuel nozzle still in his hand. He returned it to the pump with deliberate calm and raised his hand slightly. "Is there a problem?" "Officer," he asked evenly. "I said step away from the vehicle." Harrison snapped, closing the distance far too quickly. His thumb popped the retention strap on his holster, the sound loud in the sudden quiet of the lot. "And keep your hands where I can see them." Isaiah took a slow breath. "My hands are visible. I'm Commander Isaiah Sterling, United States Navy. I'm just refueling on my way home." Harrison scoffed, circling him like a predator sizing up prey. The smell of stale coffee and impatience clung to him. "Commander. Huh, you expect me to believe that? You look like you bought that costume off the internet." His eyes flicked to the truck. "Where'd you steal the vehicle?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Isaiah felt the tension snap tight, the kind of tension he recognized from alleyways overseas just before everything went wrong. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside the station, the clerk leaned closer to the window. A teenager near the soda machine stopped mid-step, and as Harrison's hand tightened on his holster, the situation crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Isaiah's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "The truck is registered in my name," he said. "My military ID is in my front pocket. If you allow me to retrieve it, I can clear this up right now." He shifted his weight just slightly, careful not to make any sudden movement. "Don't move," Harrison shouted, the last restraint in his voice snapping. In one sharp motion, he drew his weapon and leveled it directly at Isaiah's chest. The black circle of the barrel seemed to swallow the afternoon light. Inside the gas station, the clerk gasped and instinctively raised a trembling hand to her mouth. Outside, A teenager sitting near the curb lifted his phone, his screen glowing as it began to record. "Officer," Isaiah said calmly, locking his eyes on the gun. He didn't flinch. "You are pointing a loaded firearm at a commissioned officer of the United States Navy. You need to lower your weapon and de-escalate this situation." "Shut your mouth," Harrison screamed, his face flushing red beneath his sunglasses. "Get on the ground. Now." "I have done nothing wrong," Isaiah replied, his voice firm but controlled. "I am not resisting. And I am not getting on the ground for a stop that hasn't even been explained." "That's resisting arrest," Harrison yelled, turning his head toward the cruiser. "Dunning, cover me." The rookie stepped forward hesitantly, eyes darting between the uniform and the gun. "Brett, look at his insignia." Dunning whispered, "That's real. That's gold." Harrison ignored him. He holstered the pistol and yanked his taser free, the crackle of electricity filling the air. "Last warning," he snarled. "On the ground, or I light you up." Isaiah looked at the taser, then at Harrison. In his mind, calculations ran faster than thought. He could disarm both officers in seconds. Muscle memory begged him to act. But he knew the truth of this moment. If he fought back, he would be shot or buried under charges that would follow him forever. If he complied, he would live. And the truth would have room to breathe. "I am complying under duress," Isaiah said loudly, projecting his words for anyone listening. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself to his knees on the oil-stained concrete. Gravel bit into the fabric of his immaculate trousers as he placed his hands behind his head. Harrison rushed forward, driving a knee into Isaiah's back with unnecessary force, knocking the breath from his lungs. He wrenched Isaiah's arms behind him and snapped the cuffs on tight, far tighter than procedure allowed. Leaning close, he hissed, "Got you now. Stolen valor trash." Isaiah closed his eyes, the humiliation burning hotter than the Alabama sun. In that moment, as he was forced face down on the ground, one thought cut through everything else with chilling clarity. You have absolutely no idea what you just started. The backseat of the patrol car smelled of old sweat, disinfectant, and cheap pine air freshener. Isaiah's broad frame barely fit behind the plastic divider, his cuffed hands already tingling as circulation began to fade. The cruiser lurched forward, gravel popping beneath the tires as Officer Harrison pulled away from the gas station with unnecessary speed. In the side mirror, Isaiah caught a final glimpse of the teenager still holding his phone, the red recording light unmistakable. Harrison was grinning now, energized, riding the high that came from domination. He keyed the radio with theatrical confidence. "Dispatch. I've got one in custody. Male subject, impersonating a military officer. Resisting arrest. Suspected vehicle theft. Big guy." But he went down easy. The lies rolled off his tongue effortlessly, rehearsed by years of getting away with smaller ones. Isaiah said nothing. He stared out the window at the passing pine trees and began to catalog every detail with the precision of a battlefield report. Time of arrest, 14:35. Location, Miller's Crossing. Officer name, Brett Harrison. Use of force, excessive. Probable cause, none stated. Witnesses, multiple. Video evidence, likely. The war had already begun. And this time, the terrain was legal. "Quiet now." "Huh," Harrison taunted, glancing back through the rearview mirror. All that commander talk disappeared real fast. "I have the right to make a phone call," Isaiah replied calmly. "You'll get a call when I say you get a call." Harrison snapped, We need to see what kind of record you've got first. I bet it's a mile long. They pulled into the Creekwood police station, a squat brick building with peeling paint and a flag out front that had seen better days. Harrison yanked Isaiah out of the car and marched him through the front doors, past a handful of startled officers. Behind the desk sat Sergeant Miller, a graying man with tired eyes and the posture of someone who had worn a uniform long enough to recognize real authority when he saw it. Miller's gaze dropped to Isaiah's uniform, then snapped back up, his expression changing instantly. "Harrison," he said slowly, a knot forming in his stomach. "What in the hell is this? Stolen velour." "Sarge," Harrison replied proudly. "Caught him at Miller's Crossing. Fake uniform. Fancy truck. Resisted arrest." Miller stood. Stepping closer, he had served in the Marines decades earlier. He knew the difference between costume and ceremony. His eyes traced the ribbon rack, the trident, the precise tailoring, the wear of authenticity that couldn't be bought. He looked back at Harrison, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you check his ID?" Harrison hesitated. "Not yet." He kept reaching for it. "Check it. Now." Harrison rolled his eyes and reached into Isaiah's pocket. Pulling out a black leather wallet, he flipped it open and froze. Inside was a common access card. He turned it over once, then again, his confidence draining by the second. It looks real," he muttered. Miller snatched the card and swiped it through the reader. The system paused, then populated the screen. "Active duty. Naval Special Warfare. Rank Commander. Clearance. Top secret." The room went dead silent. Miller looked at the screen, then at Isaiah, then back at Harrison. His voice exploded through the station. "Take the cuffs off him. Right now." Harrison's hands began to shake as he fumbled with the keys, his earlier swagger evaporating in the harsh fluorescent light. The cuffs clicked open, leaving deep red grooves around Isaiah's wrists. Isaiah rolled his shoulders once, slowly, restoring circulation, then stood to his full height. The room seemed to shrink around him. He adjusted his jacket, brushed invisible dust from his knees, and met Sergeant Miller's eyes with a calm that carried more weight than anger ever could. "I need a secure line," Isaiah said evenly, "and I need to speak to the Judge Advocate General." "Commander, I am so sorry," Miller stammered. "This was a misunderstanding." "No." Isaiah cut him off, his voice cold and precise. "This was an unlawful detention. Your officer pointed a loaded firearm at me without cause, used excessive force, and fabricated charges. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a crime." Harrison tried to salvage control, his voice rising with panic. "We can fix this. We'll just drop everything. You walk out. No paperwork. No harm done." Isaiah turned slowly to face him. "You don't get to unring this bell. You humiliated me, restrained me, and desecrated this uniform. You made a choice." "I was doing my job," Harrison snapped defensively. "You fit the description." "What description?" Isaiah asked. Stepping closer, Harrison had no answer. The silence was suffocating. Miller handed Isaiah his phone with trembling hands. Isaiah didn't call a local attorney. He didn't call his wife. He dialed a number that existed for only the worst-case scenarios. It rang once. "Special Operations Command." A crisp voice answered. "This is Commander Isaiah Sterling. ID Alpha X-ray 1994. Isaiah said, "Code Black. I have been unlawfully detained by local law enforcement in Creekwood, Alabama. A weapon was drawn on me. I was assaulted. I am currently inside the Creekwood police station. The hostile actor is Officer Brett Harrison. I am requesting immediate JAG intervention and federal oversight. The voice on the line did not hesitate. Understood. Commander, are you safe at this moment? I am unsecured, but hostile elements remain present. Isaiah replied, do not engage further. Do not speak to them. Federal assets are being notified. Hold position. Isaiah ended the call and looked directly at Harrison, who was now visibly sweating. His face drained of color. He leaned in just enough for only Harrison to hear. You should start praying, Isaiah said quietly, because the United States government is about to fall on your head. The shift inside the station was immediate and unmistakable. Phones began ringing non-stop. One officer whispered that the governor's office was on the line. Another said a local reporter was already asking questions. Sergeant Miller stood frozen behind the desk, staring at the phone as if it might explode. Harrison, meanwhile, paced the room like a trapped animal, running his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. Panic does strange things to people who are used to control. We can't let this go federal. Harrison snapped suddenly, grabbing Miller's arm. If the feds get involved, we're finished. We book him. Right now. We say he attacked me. My word against his. He turned toward the rookie. Dunning will back me up. Kyle Dunning took a step back, his face pale. No, he said, shaking his head. I'm not lying for you. He didn't touch you. I saw everything. You little traitor. Harrison hissed, lunging forward before Miller shoved himself between them. Enough, the sergeant roared. This is over. Brett, go sit in my office. Now. Harrison ignored him. He jabbed a finger toward Isaiah. You think you're untouchable because you know people in Washington down here. I'm the law. Isaiah didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He simply looked at Harrison with something far worse than anger. Pity. You still don't understand, Isaiah said quietly. You aren't fighting a man. You're fighting a system. And it's already moving. Right on cue. The sound of heavy engines rolled across the parking lot. Tires crunched on gravel. Doors slammed. Through the front windows, black SUVs with tinted glass came to a stop in perfect formation, flanked by Alabama state troopers. Men and women in suits stepped out with practiced urgency. FBI. Federal badges caught the light. The front doors swung open without a knock. A tall man in a dark suit entered first. Eyes sharp. Presence commanding. Special Agent Thomas Reynolds. FBI. He announced. This building is now under federal control. No one argued. No one moved. Where is Commander Sterling? Reynolds asked. Isaiah stepped forward. Right here. Reynolds' posture softened instantly. Sir, we're here to get you out. Behind him, a Navy JAG officer spoke coldly. Officer Brett Harrison. You are now under investigation for false imprisonment, civil rights violations, and assault under color of law. You are advised to remain silent. Harrison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. As agents fanned out to secure servers, body cams, and evidence lockers, Isaiah walked toward the exit, flanked by federal authority. Cameras were already gathering outside. Flashbulbs popped. From the back of the room, Harrison watched his world collapse in real time. The badge on his chest suddenly felt very small. Outside the station, the scene had transformed into controlled chaos. News vans crowded the narrow street. reporters shouting questions as FBI agents formed a tight perimeter. Isaiah moved through it all in silence, his posture composed, his expression unreadable. He did not look back. Inside the building, however, the real damage was only beginning. Within days, the city issued a carefully worded statement calling the incident a regrettable failure of communication. Behind closed doors, officials scrambled. The mayor authorized a quiet settlement offer, $200,000, a non-disclosure agreement, an attempt to make the problem disappear. Isaiah refused without even reading the paperwork. This was never about money. Then, a week later, the story cracked wide open. Kyle Dunning, the rookie officer, walked into the office of a federal civil rights attorney carrying a small SD card in his pocket. His hands shook as he placed it on the desk. "That's the original dashcam footage," he said, unedited. And that's not all. Dunning told them about the storage unit off Route 9, Unit 4B, the place Harrison called his toy box. According to Dunning, it was where seized property went to die. Cash, jewelry, electronics, firearms, property taken from out-of-state drivers arrested on fabricated charges. If they signed forfeiture papers, Harrison dropped the charges. If they didn't, their lives were ruined. And then Dunning said a name that stopped everyone in the room cold. Ethan Cole, a college musician, pulled over late one night. A vintage Gibson guitar in the back seat. Harrison wanted it. When the kid refused to let go, it turned physical. Ethan fell, hit his head. Harrison delayed calling for medical help. 2 days later, Ethan Cole was dead. What had started as a racist arrest was now something far worse. It wasn't a bad cop. It was a criminal enterprise. Federal prosecutors didn't hesitate. They requested surveillance, warrants, and tactical support. And late one humid Alabama night, as panic gnawed at him and rumors spread through the department, Brett Harrison made one final mistake. He drove toward that storage unit, unaware that every move he made was already being watched. The storage facility off Route 9 sat in darkness, rows of corrugated metal doors stretching like a graveyard under flickering security lights. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Brett Harrison's personal truck rolled through the gate. He hadn't slept. Rumors were everywhere. The rookie was talking. The feds were digging. Panic had stripped away what little judgment he had left. He parked in front of Unit 4B and jumped out, glancing over his shoulder as if the shadows themselves were watching him. His hands shook as he punched in the lock code and yanked the door up. Inside was the harvest of a decade of corruption-stacked televisions, boxes of jewelry, designer handbags, power tools, sealed evidence bags that had never made it to an evidence room, and plastic bins stuffed with cash. In the back corner, leaning against a stack of tires, was the vintage Gibson guitar. "I've got to burn it," Harrison muttered. Dragging a gas can from his truck, he splashed fuel across the pile, the fumes filling the air. He grabbed the guitar case last, planning to destroy it somewhere else, anywhere the truth couldn't follow. Now, a calm voice said, floodlights exploded to life, turning night into blinding white. A loudspeaker boomed across the units. "Brett Harrison, federal agents drop the fuel can and show us your hands." Harrison froze. For a split second, his hand twitched toward the pistol at his waist. Then he saw them, FBI SWAT advancing in formation. Shields up. Rifles trained. Agents moving with lethal precision. And behind them, walking calmly, was Commander Isaiah Sterling, not in uniform, not armed, untouchable. The fight drained out of Harrison's body. He dropped the gas can and fell to his knees in the spreading puddle. Agents swarmed him, zip-tying his wrists and dragging him clear as others secured the unit. Inside, an agent opened the guitar case. Tucked beneath the strings was a laminated photo of a smiling young man on a stage. On the back, written in marker, property of Ethan Cole. If found, please return to Mom. In that moment, the case was sealed, not just with evidence, but with truth. 6 months later, the reckoning arrived inside a federal courtroom in Mobile, Alabama. By then, the case of United States versus Brett Harrison had become a national spectacle. News cameras lined the courthouse steps. Civil rights activists packed the gallery, and legal analysts whispered the same word over and over again: precedent. This was no longer just about one arrest. It was about what happens when a badge becomes a weapon. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was heavy and unforgiving. Commander Isaiah Sterling sat in the front row beside his wife, Sarah, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. A few seats away sat Ethan Cole's parents, clutching the vintage Gibson guitar returned to them by federal agents, their hands trembling as they waited for justice to finally speak. At the defense table, Brett Harrison looked nothing like the officer who had strutted across that gas station lot. He had lost weight. His uniform was gone, replaced by an orange federal jumpsuit. His shoulders slumped forward, his eyes darting nervously. Searching for support that no longer existed, the police union had abandoned him. The department had disavowed him. Even the officers who once laughed at his jokes were now testifying against him. The prosecution dismantled him piece by piece. Dashcam footage played in brutal silence, showing Isaiah kneeling, compliant, hands visible, while Harrison screamed and struck him. Financial records traced stolen property. Witnesses described the toy box storage unit and the pattern of roadside robberies. Then came the testimony that broke the room. Kyle Dunning, voice shaking, described the night Ethan Cole died. How Harrison struck him with a baton and delayed calling for help to secure the guitar. Several jurors wiped away tears. When Isaiah took the stand, he spoke with calm precision. "I could have fought back," he said, "but I knew if I did, I would be dead, and he would be called a hero. I chose to survive and let the truth do the fighting." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood, hands trembling slightly. "We find the defendant guilty," he said, count after count, each word driving the verdict deeper. Civil rights violations, kidnapping, racketeering, second-degree murder. The courtroom exhaled as one. The only sound left was the quiet sobbing of a man who finally understood that his badge could no longer protect him. Judge Eleanor Vance did not rush her words. She adjusted her glasses, looked down at the sentencing documents, then lifted her gaze to Brett Harrison with an expression that carried neither anger nor sympathy, only finality. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice steady and unyielding, "you did not make a mistake. You built a pattern. You abused the authority entrusted to you, turned the badge into a tool of terror, and treated innocent people as prey." She paused, letting the silence press in. "For deprivation of civil rights under color of law, I sentence you to 10 years. For racketeering, 20 years. For the kidnapping and the murder of Ethan Cole, 28 years. The courtroom stiffened as the math became inescapable. These sentences will run consecutively. That is a total of 58 years in federal prison. The gavel struck like a gunshot. You will not be eligible for parole until you are an old man. Marshals. Take him away. Harrison's knees buckled. To U.S. Marshals lifted him as he sobbed uncontrollably, his cries echoing through the chamber as he was dragged past the gallery. For a brief moment, his eyes locked with Isaiah's. There was no triumph in Isaiah's face. No smile. Only a slow, solemn nod. Not forgiveness. Closure. In the months that followed, the fallout was absolute. The district attorney resigned and later pled guilty to obstruction. The police chief was sentenced on federal charges. The Creekwood Police Department was dismantled and rebuilt under oversight. The storage unit on Route 9 was emptied. Its contents returned to victims. And the building itself transformed into the Ethan Cole Community Music Center, a place where music replaced fear. Isaiah Sterling retired from the Navy soon after. He ran for sheriff on a platform of transparency and accountability and won in a landslide. On his first day in office, he stood before the same town that had once watched him kneel in handcuffs and spoke quietly into the microphone. "Power is not a prize," he said. "It is a responsibility. And if you betray it, I will come for you." Late one evening, Isaiah drove back to Miller's Crossing. The oil stain where he had been forced to the ground was gone, scrubbed away by time and rain. He took a breath, got back into his truck, and drove toward home. Justice, at last, was no longer a promise. It was permanent.